Fascinating Frontiers, Episode 51, April 10th, 2026. Hey everyone, Patrick here in Vancouver. Welcome to Episode 51 of Fascinating Frontiers. It's April 10th, 2026, and we've got a show packed with stories that feel like they're all talking to one another. From the tense final hours of a crew coming home from the moon, to the quiet, long-term science that keeps paying dividends, to some surprising discoveries both near and far. Let's dive in. Right now, 4 astronauts are just hours away from the most dangerous part of their entire journey. The Artemis II crew has finished their loop around the moon, the first time humans have traveled that far from Earth in more than 50 years. And they're now lining up for a high-speed plunge back into our atmosphere. They'll slam into the air at lunar return velocity, pushing the heat shield harder than anything we've tested with a crew aboard since the Apollo era. This re-entry isn't just another checklist item, it's the moment the entire mission rides on a single piece of hardware doing exactly what it's supposed to do under conditions we can only partially simulate on the ground. The tension is palpable because everyone involved knows that plasma temperatures can exceed 2,500 degrees Celsius, radio blackout is guaranteed for several minutes, and the margin between success and catastrophe is measured in centimeters of ablator and fractions of a degree in the entry angle. While the crew prepares for that white-hot plunge, they took a moment to share something truly breathtaking with the rest of us. As their spacecraft swung behind the moon, the lunar disk briefly hid our planet from view. Then, as they came back around, Earth rose over the stark, cratered horizon of the far side, an Earthset captured in crisp detail. Those photographs are more than just eye candy. They give engineers real data on how cameras behave in cislunar space, how light scatters off the airless terrain, and how the contrast between our blue world and the moon's gray landscape looks under those exact lighting conditions. Looking at those images, you can't help but feel the isolation of deep space travel. Our entire planet, all 8 billion of us, reduced to a fragile marble hanging above a dead, airless landscape. It's the kind of perspective that quietly rearranges how you think about home. And that sense of awe clearly rippled all the way back to Earth. On their final full day in space, the crew had live conversations with Senator Katie Britt and Senator Cantwell. Hearing elected officials take the time to speak directly with the astronauts felt genuinely moving. These aren't scripted press events, they're real exchanges that brought the human reality of this mission into living rooms across the country and showed how deeply national interest in NASA's return to the moon has grown. Yet for all that attention, these 4 remain civil servants. Details that have emerged about their compensation paint a striking picture. Relatively modest salaries for people who just flew farther from Earth than anyone in decades. It's a powerful reminder that human spaceflight is still very much a calling. These men and women accept the pay of public servants because the work itself, pushing the frontier, testing hardware that will one day carry us to Mars, is the reward. Their dedication feels especially poignant as we watch them prepare for the most perilous moment of the flight. And here's what I find so compelling about the whole Artemis program. Even after the crew splashes down safely off San Diego, the mission will keep teaching us for years. The science payoff from these lunar flights doesn't stop when the hatch opens. Data streams, instrument readings, and eventually physical samples continue to deliver new insights long after the flight is over. Planetary geologists, materials scientists, and instrumentation teams all treat Artemis as a sustained resource rather than a one-and-done event. Each successful step adds another layer to our cumulative knowledge, refining the tools and procedures we'll need for longer, deeper journeys. That steady, patient accumulation of understanding is exactly what will let us move from visiting the moon to staying there, and eventually from the moon to Mars. Of course, not every lunar mission goes according to plan, and that's instructive too. The recent Peregrine lander attempt didn't reach the surface, but it still taught us valuable lessons. Every time we send something to another world, we're reminded how extraordinarily difficult this work remains. Achievements should never start to feel routine. Both the setbacks and the triumphs are part of the same slow, steady march of exploration. We cannot take any lunar landing for granted, no matter how many we eventually attempt. That perspective keeps the entire community grounded, literally and figuratively, and focused on continuous improvement. Speaking of that growing community, it's exciting to see how wide the circle is becoming. A faculty member from Tennessee Tech has been selected to contribute directly to NASA's planned 2028 crewed lunar landing. Bringing university researchers into the actual surface operations planning shows how seriously NASA is taking these academic partnerships. It's one thing to have professors publish papers, it's another to have their expertise shape flight hardware, procedures, and the day-to-day decisions astronauts will make on the lunar surface. These collaborations are becoming an essential part of how we prepare for a sustained human presence on the moon, and I suspect we'll look back on moments like this as the point when the whole enterprise started feeling truly interdisciplinary. Before the Artemis II crew even left the planet, they found an unusual source of inspiration. They were given a private screening of the film adaptation of Andy Weir's novel Project Hail Mary. They watched it just before launch and later described it as genuinely uplifting. There's something wonderful about the way art and science keep feeding each other. A story about human ingenuity, problem solving under impossible conditions, and the stubborn refusal to give up clearly resonated with people who were about to climb atop a rocket and fly beyond the moon. Sometimes the best motivation doesn't come from another technical briefing. It comes from a well-told tale that reminds you why you fell in love with this work in the first place. Now let's shift from the human side of spaceflight to some remarkable discoveries that have been unfolding light years away. Astronomers have finally located hydrogen that was long thought to be missing from the early universe. This new observational work confirms existing models of how the cosmos evolved in the first billion years after the Big Bang. The peer-reviewed study, published in the Astrophysical Journal, closes a major gap that had been puzzling cosmologists for years, finding that missing hydrogen brings our picture of the infant universe into sharper focus and gives us greater confidence that our fundamental understanding of cosmic evolution is on the right track. It's one of those quiet but deeply satisfying moments when a long-standing mystery simply dissolves in the light of better data. Staying with surprising observations, something unexpected turned up much closer to home, on our own sun. The Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope captured unusually strong calcium-2H and hydrogen-epsilon lines during the fading stages of a modest C-class solar flare back on August 19, 2022. Computer models had predicted much weaker signals than what the telescope actually recorded. That discrepancy is revealing gaps in our understanding of exactly how solar flares heat and energize the sun's atmosphere. Solar physicists now have fresh, high-quality data that will force them to refine their models of flare physics. Every observation like this is a reminder of how complex and surprising our own star still is. Even after decades of study, the sun can still catch us off guard and send us back to the drawing board in the best possible way. While we're thinking about things you can actually see in the sky this week, Comet Pan-STARRS is putting on a decent show for evening observers as the constellation Hercules climbs higher. The last quarter moon occurred today at 12:52 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which means the sky will gradually get darker and more welcoming for faint fuzzies. This weekly sky guide also highlights the return of some favorite globular clusters, including the magnificent M13 in Hercules. Even with the moon still fairly bright, patient backyard astronomers should be able to pick up the comet if they know where to look. There's something quietly rewarding about watching a visitor from the outer solar system drift through our skies, especially when it cooperates with our evening viewing windows. If you've ever wanted a taste of what real astronaut training feels like without leaving the ground, there's a fascinating story out of an Alabama facility that's open to the public. A journalist recently went through the same rigorous drills that actual crews use before flight. The experience was both physically challenging and deeply informative. It's one thing to read about centrifuge runs, emergency egress training, or neutral buoyancy practice. It's another to feel your body slammed by those forces and realize how much preparation goes into every minute of a real mission. Programs like this create a personal, visceral connection to spaceflight that you simply cannot get from books or documentaries alone. They remind us that behind every elegant launch video are months and years of sweat, repetition, and careful attention to detail. Finally, a quick look at some new tools NASA is making available to researchers working on the next generation of flight. The Unmanned Autonomy Research Complex has opened access to its Windshaper fan array and the companion Windprobe system. The facility is designed to study low-speed flight characteristics, gust response, wind gradients, hovering dynamics, for all kinds of uncrewed systems. It uses a Python application programming interface and OptiTrack motion capture to give researchers precise, repeatable data in a controlled, indoor environment. These capabilities should accelerate development of everything from advanced drones to the small robotic explorers that will one day scout Martian caves or Titan's lakes. Making sophisticated test facilities like this available beyond NASA's own walls feels like a smart, forward-looking move that will pay dividends quickly. If you could somehow compress the entire journey of Artemis II into a single heartbeat, Those final 10 minutes of atmospheric re-entry would be the moment the heart nearly stops. A spacecraft returning from the moon hits the upper atmosphere at roughly 11 kilometers per second. The air in front of it literally cannot get out of the way fast enough, so it compresses into a glowing plasma sheath hot enough to melt steel. The vehicle is essentially punching a hole through increasingly dense layers of atmosphere, converting all that orbital energy into heat through ram pressure and friction. Modern heat shields, often made of phenolic-impregnated carbon ablator, deliberately sacrifice themselves in a controlled burn, carrying heat away as the material chars and flakes off. The process is so violent that radio signals are blacked out for several minutes. Every crewed lunar return has to endure that communications blackout. And yet, the exact way that plasma interacts with the microscopic surface texture of the shield still holds surprises. Slight changes in material porosity or the vehicle's angle of attack can shift the heating rate by tens of %. We can model the broad strokes pretty well, but predicting precisely how a brand new heat shield will behave under real lunar return speeds remains partly an empirical exercise. That gap between simulation and actual flight is exactly why Artemis II's re-entry is so valuable. It will give engineers live, high-fidelity data from the fastest crewed atmospheric plunge since Apollo. Those measurements will shape every heat shield that follows, all the way to the first crewed missions to Mars. The far-side Earth-set images add another rich layer to the story. Because the moon's far side never faces Earth, those photographs were only possible once the spacecraft had swung behind our satellite. The lunar disk itself blocked our planet for a few moments before it dramatically re-emerged. The shots combine the familiar blue marble against the airless, sunlit lunar terrain in a single frame that is both poetic and scientifically useful. They don't just inspire. They provide engineering teams with real visual data on lighting conditions and camera performance in cislunar space. Before we wrap up, keep an eye on the data that will be coming down from Artemis II after splashdown. Every sensor reading, every temperature profile, every bit of plasma interaction data will directly inform the heat shield design for the very first crewed missions to Mars. That steady, patient march from the moon outward is exactly what makes this moment feel historic. That covers today's space and science news. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with a fellow space enthusiast. These stories are always better when they're discussed together. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Clear skies, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This podcast is curated by Patrick, but generated using AI voice synthesis of my voice using ElevenLabs. The primary reason to do this is I unfortunately don't have the time to be consistent with generating all the content and wanted to focus on creating consistent and regular episodes for all the themes that I enjoy, and I hope others do as well.
Drifting softly through the black, a million stars behind our back. The void hums low.